All right. Good morning. Uh, let's see if folks filter in. Welcome back to another Elfbait stream. This is Eli. Obviously, I am Elfbait. Um, so I did hit the go button a little early, so we'll see if folks start to filter in. It is another Monday stream. Uh, I've been bouncing back and forth between Mondays and Sundays. Mondays seem to be doing better in terms of attendance. So we'll see how that goes. Excuse me. I got a bit of a frog in the throat, which is not exactly what you want on a stream day, but it is what it is. So we are on March 20th, 2023, and we're going to be talking about Justifiers. Justifiers RPG is a longtime favorite of mine, and has been since it first came out. If you hear a car horn honking in the background, there is somebody going nuts in my neighborhood on their car horn. So I have no idea what's going on. Hopefully everything's okay. So let me go ahead and pull up some information here, some notes that I had. Justifiers goes back to 1988 when it was first produced. It is an RPG of space adventure with an attempt to be, if not gritty, a little grittier. You have kind of a, as was popular in the late 80s, a sort of corporate future that humanity is struggling to deal with. And as such, various things happen that shape our universe. Now, good morning to all the folks who are starting to show up. That's cool. Hey, mages. All right. So Justifiers came out in, like I mentioned, in 1988. It was a 128-page book. Now, these are all digest-sized books. And which made them very portable. It was written by Gideon, a mysterious figure who only goes by the name Gideon, and I've never been able to track down any additional name for him, along with Blaine Pardoe. And they published under their title of their company of Starchild. It was not the only game they produced, though it was the first. That I remember. They had a kaiju battle game where you built and fought with your own kaiju called Monsters with an exclamation mark at the end. They had Guardians, which was a superheroes game. And they had a game called Dominion, which was a game of resistance against an alien race that had conquered Earth. Very interesting games for the most part from Starchild. About the only one that I would say that was kind of meh. I mean, as far as like in terms of being unique and something we haven't seen too much would be their Guardians game. At the time, I don't believe there were any kaiju build your own kaiju games. Monsters told you to basically find a giant rubber dinosaur or a action figure or whatever, and then write it up and use it for your kaiju. All right, so Justifiers is, like I said, it came out in '88. It is set in the year 2311, and the timeline for that starts very shortly after the game was published. I think it was their intent to kind of get things rolling real quick, and so they have it. I think we discover the technology for faster than light travel in something like 1992 or something like that. And I'll get into the specifics of that. Also, worth mentioning that this game went through a couple of incarnations. There was the original blue and white cover, for the first edition for Justifiers. There was then a more there was then a full color um, blue background, colored characters, second edition, and there was a box set. One thing that was nice from Starchild is that for a couple of their games, Justifiers included, they did box sets, and so that was always kind of nice. So I should also mention that 5 years ago I did a video on Justifiers. I'm hoping to make this a little bit more informative and a little bit more interesting than that one was. That is far, far, far too true. So, Justifiers, what is it? All right, so it is not that furry space game, which is how a lot of people want to call it. It does involve anthropomorphic animals, and that was one of the main selling points. But that's not all it offers, and there's some explanation in world as to why they exist, rather than just because. And they do exist in a human world, um, and so we've got a future where humanity has spread through the stars in a very clunky, janky way because of the limits of their faster than light travel. So let's talk about the FTL first. So the faster than light travel in Justifiers is accomplished through a system called Transmat, where they found that they could create a field that would that would create a portal that could go up to 6 light years away, but it could only be maintained stably at a very set size, 20 by 20 on the outside diameter, and it couldn't be maintained any bigger or any smaller. The problem with Transmat technology turned out to be that it was a one-way trip. You needed another gate, another Transmat gate on the other end to get back. So exploration of space was kind of on hold until they could figure it out for a bit. Um, they did consider using slow ships to go to target locations and then set up transmat systems to where then we could start fast tracking things back and forth. But ultimately, the solution they came up with was um, sending blind beaming people across the galaxy uh, through the transmat gates, to then explore worlds on the other end and then set up a return gate, um, and then come back. So initially, this was done with people. Um, uh, and those people would be either corporate employees or people who were serving out sentences, mercenaries, things like that. Uh, but there was a big upheaval about blind beaming humans across the galaxy, possibly to their death. And so that became cost prohibitive because every time there was a problem, they had to pay out big dividends to the families and all of that. And so the corporations looked at other options, and that option was the uh, beta humanoid. Beta class humanoid. Well, first it was the alpha class humanoid and then the beta class humanoid. So alpha class humanoids were animals who were physically the same but had human DNA spliced into them and given human intelligence. These existed prior to the need for space exploration. Actually, in the timeline, they were used early on in corporate warfare. There have been a couple of corporate wars, two corporate wars in this world. Obviously, with a corporate universe, you have to have corporate wars. Um, there is no government other than corporate governments, and each of them rules them their own territory, kind of um, to their own desires. The only thing that they have to answer to is another corporation, basically, that's called the Union, referred to as the Union, but it's actually the Galactic World Alliance, which is essentially a giant trade union that governs fair treatment of people. Anyways, so alphas were used for intel and stuff, and then they started using them to justify planets. They would still have human handlers, so that was a step in the right direction. Later on, then they were able to enhance this product to become the beta class humanoids, which is um, a fully humanoid animal human hybrid um, that retains enough of its animal nature to be able to take advantage of the natural gifts that those various species would have. Turtles have armor and swimming ability. Predators have their senses and their natural weapons, but they also would then possess the human characteristics uh, to be able to do these missions. Hey Echo, excuse me. Hey Echo, how's it going? And real quick, before I continue too much further, I wanted to actually show off some of the what the books look like. So I have this is all I have. I used to have them all, but they were lost. So I have these. These are the four I have. I focused on getting the core kind of rule books as opposed to the adventures. Um, but I do have. They are for the most part available on Drive Through RPG, and so there is. Uh, you can still play this game, which is neat. Um, and I'll show this here. So here is the second edition Justifiers RPG. This is, you can see we got a couple of betas on the cover. Got looks like a tiger and a badger. And when I say they're anthropomorphic animals, they are not just mammals. There are reptiles, like I mentioned. We have turtles, amphibians, even cetaceans and pinnipeds. So you got like seals and all that, and insects even, and birds. Um, Here's the Aborigines source book. This is a book that details several of the planets in the game that have their own species on the world. And so this also brings in a set of rules that are a little questionable. They call it magic. And so the idea is that out there in the galaxy there are forces that we don't quite understand that go beyond like psionics and stuff. Here's one of the adventures, Cold as Ice. It's a polar adventure, obviously. Um, this is the hybrid source book. This is the most cheesecake cover because this actually wraps around to show her legs. So the hybrid source book is an entire source book on what happens when beta humanoids crossbreed. Because, and we'll get into the details of that. So it's an interesting book. The Tower, another adventure. This one actually deals with discovering an alien artifact. Out of the Mists. This is one I've never actually owned, and when I said I had all of them, actually I was wrong. I think this is that one that was very hard to get a hold of, because I believe this one was one of the last ones they published, and so it didn't get circulated all that often, all that far. Cyber MedTech. This is a book that covers cybernetics and a corporation that is not detailed up front, which is Cyber MedTech. Cyber MedTech is an interesting corporation because it was formed by leading medical and cybernetic minds in all the corporations who basically ran away, started their own corporation, and they sort of have a weird place in the galaxy in that they have some plan that they're up to, and nobody quite knows what it is. They have a hidden base too. This book includes stuff on how to run a cyber medtech campaign if you wanted to. Corporate source book. This is the second edition of this. I do not have this edition. I have the original edition, which you can see is kind of monochrome. That is an Ares Marine on the front. Every corporation has their own contingent of Ares Marines, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. This cover is tiny because the only image I could find of this thing was super small. This is the Insidious campaign, and this is sort of a cross between an Alien and a Predator story. and yeah, it's pretty hardcore. And then there is the Silent Corporation source book, which again I can only find a tiny little picture of it. Silent Corporation is the mob in a world of corporate warfare without any laws other than their own. Organized crime has had to band together to form its own corporation, the Silent Corporation. And so, much like other corporations, it has departments. Each one of those departments is really a crime family, and it's very interesting. But so this is also another way you could play a campaign in the Justifiers universe. All right, so I'm going to be clearing my throat a bit. Like I said, I picked up a frog somewhere, and I don't know where it is. Anyways, so Justifiers is a game in which you are playing a team of, as the title says, Justifiers. And Justifiers are folks that go out into the galaxy and explore worlds. You get put into a shuttle that is 20 by 20 by 70, which is the largest object you can get to go through in a single transmat. And then you are rocketed through the gate up to 6 light years away to your target destination. And then you are stuck on that planet until you have a chance to assemble your return gate, and a preset amount of time has gone by. So, mission, because they don't want people just up and running, the gate doesn't activate until you have been there long enough, and then the corporation will activate the gate. Or it'll activate based on a timer and stuff, and then you can come back. But as soon as it activates, they're probably going to step through with a corporate team and kind of start setting things up. Hey, Grumpy. And so the corporations in the setting are TTMS, which is the Terran Transmat Specialists specialties. They make all the transmat. They have an absolute um, the they have an absolute monopoly on transmat technology. There's then Tau Ceti Prime, also known as the Cetans. Um, they are they produce foodstuffs, so they're agribusiness across worlds. So a lot of their justifying missions are to find new products and new worlds that they can grow things on. There's Enclave Ltd, which is all about habitation structures and construction materials. So your colony buildings and all of that are handled by Enclave. There's United Industries, which is the youngest, I believe, and they are all about weapons and body armor. That's their thing, weapon systems. STPD Engineering is described as the big loser of the last corporate war. And it actually never says really what they developed, but they're just kind of this corporation that came out of the last corporate war in sorry shape. There's Behazard Mining, which is all about heavy gravity mining. That's all they do. They haven't felt the need to venture out of that. It's a nice niche that they like, and it works for them. And then, of course, I mentioned Cyber MedTech and the Silent Corporation. Cyber MedTech, as its name would entail, is all about cybernetics and medical facilities. And then there's the Galactic World Alliance, also known as the Union, which is a giant galaxy-spanning trade union that makes sure that everybody doesn't get stepped on. All right, so I mentioned beta class humanoids, so that's kind of the center of the game. Player characters do not have to be beta class humanoids. They can be human, they can be altered human or augmented human, and they can be high G humans. So humans, most humans in service to corporations as justifiers are there beyond prison sentences because justifying is so dangerous that no self-respecting human would really put themselves in that kind of danger. So you're either on a prison sentence or you have a death wish. You might be a mercenary who likes to rake it in, but probably not. And most likely the corporations aren't going to hire a mercenary for justifying when they can get a prisoner or something like that. If you play a prisoner, a human, you're there under sentence. Your justifying career is for a number of years equal to your sentence, and that you will be there working there as long as you can. And any money you make is actually put in escrow for you for when you were released. You do get a little bit of a stipend to spend on personal items, and you're not allowed to own weapons. There are also augmented humans. Augmented humans were the super soldiers of the corporate wars who really are having trouble integrating into human society. They, um, they're your Captain Americas, your war vets. They're the guys who were made for war. They're genetically engineered. We're not talking about like Captain America super soldiers. Augmented humans were genetically engineered um, to be um, to be a weapon, and so they really don't have much of a place in human society. And so, while they might find places in security details or with the silent corporation, they a lot of them end up as justifiers. They are not under unless they are they are also criminals. They're not under any sentence, and they have a standard buyback like any other a squirrel. And so then there are the high G humans, which one of the problems with Justifiers is that it is an indie game, and I believe that there's a lot of information that the writer had in his head that did not necessarily make it into the pages, because the high G humans, it doesn't say where they came from and whether they're genetically engineered or they're a byproduct of generations living on high G worlds. But humans generally don't adapt that fast to I don't think they would be that I'm inclined to believe that they were another form of augmented human. High G humans, however, um, are, as far as I understand it, all connected to Bahazard. And so if they're out there working for another company, they are actually sending they're sending a percentage of their income back to Bahazard and to their enclaves. They almost they almost dip into making the High G humans come across as dwarves. The illustration is kind of dwarfy, um, but I don't like that, so I tend to ignore it. So, and then you have the beta class humanoids, or betas as they're called, um, which I know is a term that doesn't age well, but we're talking about designations here and not name calling. Dang it! This cough. Let me see if I can clear my throat a second here. All right, some information on betas. Beta class humanoids are owned by the corporations that make them. However, due to the Union having categorized them as semi-human, they were then deemed to be they could not be owned forever, and so a system of buyback was created. Imagine sort of a corporate buyout. So every character you play is going to have a buyback, and that buyback, um, all your missions that you do earn money and buyback towards your buyback. In terms of uh, their nature as life forms, 40% of all betas are sterile. Children of betas are still under the control of the children of betas that are born to betas that are still owned by the corporation are they themselves then owned. Um, Betas can interbreed, and most of those couplings will produce, if they're not sterile, will produce twins, one of each species. And then there's a 25% chance of that offspring being a hybrid between the two species. And those have a massive buyback if they're born inside the corporation, because they usually bring all sorts of new and interesting characteristics to them. There are also gammas, which are the 5% of the mating between a human and a beta humanoid that end up producing they end up being like very human like animals, and so um, those are also kind of sought after because they're kind of exotic and they often have special abilities too. There are mutants that are often produced in these interminglings, and they're referred to so respectfully as mutts. Yay! And they come in two different groups. There's trilobals, which have psychic abilities beyond those that normal folks have, because they actually grow a third lobe of their brain. And then there are corporeal mutants who have physical characteristics that neither of their parent species have. And these can be anything from an enhanced strength or even reduced strength, um, all the way up to other weird abilities. And so that's sort of just what the breakdown of the humanoids are. Um, Game wise, it is a percentile based system. You have, all of your skills are on 2d10s, and you roll them as normal. Your character has a career or a skill, a set of skills, and your skills plus your not your skills, excuse me, your ability scores plus whatever your beta characteristics are creates your buyback. And so the buyback is what you're kind of playing off for the rest of the game. And so here I've actually got an image of the buyback. So this is pretty indicative of the interior of the rule books, all black and white. The art ranges from pretty good to really sketchy, and some of it is clearly an obvious trace job. If you're There's a lot of stuff that you can see that was pulled straight from like Alien Legion and the like. Um, you'll see the buyback here, and then also the pay per mission. And so there are shares. So 35% of the pay per mission is for the commanding officer, 35% is divided up amongst the rest of the officers, and then 30% of it is divided amongst the enlisted and warrant officers. So your corporation will hold you accountable if you willfully destroy property. So it disinclines folks to crash helicopters and stuff into aliens or whatever that you might encounter, because they'll take it they'll take it out of your pay, and then they'll apply it to your buyback. Your buyback, as you can see here, let me see if I can blow this up a bit, is 200,000 times your attributes divided by 10 times the number of psionics you have. So your buyback is often in the millions, which is kind of cool. I mean, I know that a lot of people might be squeamish over the concept of slavery. It's the context of the game. It's something you're fighting against. It's something that the world, the universe itself has, um, operations going on. There are free betas. There are even worlds that they've managed to get a hold of on their own, and so things are improving for them. But yeah, that's part of the setting. The game does have a number of Aboriginal species, as I mentioned before, and those look. Here's an example of an aquatic race. Um, the write-ups for these are pretty cool. For the systems, you'll get a brief on the planetary system, what corporation is kind of owns it or is in charge of it, their tech level, and then you'll get scores for running these as NPCs or potentially PCs. I mean, the game at its core conceit has that you're out there justifying, but there's nothing saying that after you run that for a while, you might not let you know. I got this cool campaign where we're gonna play a Guilia, resistance group, on their planet to dealing, fighting Tau Ceti Prime. You could do that, and it wouldn't be a problem. Let's see. The action in the game, kind of don't want to get too much into the themes of it. So skills, I mentioned that you have careers, and there are several different specialties in here. It's kind of cool because they've got um, classes like field scientist, and then there are breakdowns beneath that of specialties. You have engineers and security specialists, and uh, so your PC is going to have a specialty. Then there is some cross training in here, which is important as well. And then there's even an option. There's even some skills you can pick up for um, things you have just kind of picked up, in the day to day. Because in your downtime, betas live like people. They have apartments provided by the corporation. You know they they eat at the mess. They buy things. Um, Equipment in the game is, we'll get into that in a moment. I do want to show here that any skill roll you make is modified, based on factors in the situation. These are just examples, but a lack of tools minus 25%, lack of materials minus 20, in the middle of combat minus 35. And so the it could be, it's an alien design minus 25, and these all add up. These are all cumulative. So your skill checks can range from pretty easy to do to impossible. You're not rolling against targets. You're just like a lot of percentile based systems, Call of Cthulhu, for example, Star Frontiers. You're rolling pass fail, and it is the percentage chance that is modified. Um, Call of Cthulhu does that slightly differently, where you have the level of success, but you still are pass fail on that. So, uh, combat in the game is a little wonky. And while I'm talking about that, I'm actually going to pull up the character sheet here. You can see, I think you can judge a lot about a game just by what's on its character sheet. Um, so combat in the game is something I'm not in love with. In addition, it seems to be lacking some basic writing that we had to fill in for ourselves back in the day. I mentioned earlier, this seems like Gideon, when he was writing the rules, had a lot up here, and most of it made it on the page, but the game suffers from a lack of, I think, editorial process. Because the combat system tells you how to engage in hand-to-hand combat, it tells you how to shoot, and you can see on your character sheet here you have a speed. Speed is both a reference to how fast you can actually move, but it's also what determines your initiative. Uh, there is no discussion in the combat rules for how to move in combat, which I found to be really a problem. I mean, how far can I move in combat? When do I move in combat? So what we ended up doing is adopting a very simple system of, you get a move and an action. You could, and that was kind of sussed out by reading what speed is, and then determining that you have a combat action, um, you have an action. An action is described as um, how long it takes basically to perform a task, like a single task, and it's kind of nebulous, and I don't like that either. So we came up with the move and an action, because that seemed like what he was leaning towards, but it's not in the rules. So if you're going to pick this up, um, you could easily sub in uh, like a fifth edition style of action kind of economy sort of thing, where you have a move plus action, which is kind of what we ended up doing. um, and then you could even adopt the segments or whatever from or turns from another game if you wanted to. um, there is a lot of equipment in this game, which I like. The equipment in the game ranges from pretty mundane stuff to high tech weapons, but it's never too crazy. I mean, you have lasers and stuff. Um, we see a selection of environmental suits. Let's see. Here are some of the views. Here's actually the breakdown on the betas. Like this is what the write ups look like for the betas. You have attribute modifiers and the like. Um, but yeah, so then there are a number of vehicles, everything from land to air vehicles, even underwater vehicles, because there are some adventures that go to aquatic planets, which is neat. Um, so rather than kind of rattle on a lot about the minutia of the game, um, why do I like it, and why have I kind of held on to this for the 30 years that I've been playing it or wanting to play it. Um, First of all, I mean, as a game, I feel like it was really well put together as an indie product. Nearly every book has something new to bring to the game. Most of the adventures have new animals in them for different kinds of betas, new equipment. And so every book you picked up was an adventure and then had some additional information. Um, one of the adventures is an adventure, and then it has a big section on campaigning and how to actually run existing campaigns, or long campaigns and existing campaigns. Um, it has little bits and pieces that are there for folks who like to play in different ways. For example, the Cyber MedTech book introduces the option to actually play the stock market in the game with your character. Um, Betas cannot own stock, but they can often act through their beta friendly groups that will like act as proxies for them and stuff. So, um, oh yeah, you got a good haul today. Cool. Um, there's a lot you can do in this setting, and it's a survival setting, which always appeals to me. There is, as I mentioned before, you're getting chucked to this planet, blind beamed to another world. You have to land there in your shuttle, and then you have to survive long enough to get, you know, the return gate set up. You're not sent there without equipment. Um, and actually, real quick, I'm going to pull up an image of the shuttle. So here is this is the illustration in the book for the shuttle. It is a two-story affair with, you know, minimal resources. The game then gives you a list of exactly what is on each shuttle, and then there's some modifications by mission. The two big cargo bays here, they include a bunch of containers, and that's where all of your stuff is. You will note on this ship there are no living quarters. The corporation does not want to make things easy for you. You have to sleep outside in a shelter. I mean, you could set up in the bay of the shuttle when you're done if you needed to. In one of our adventures, there was a particularly large hostile creature on the planet, and so the party retreated to the shuttle. Once the shuttle lands, it is down. It does not fly again. It only has enough fuel and control to land on the planet, and while it's on its way down, it deploys a couple of satellites into orbit, so you have communications across the planet while you're exploring. When you get down to the planet, you have to put together your vehicles out of modular systems. Um, Only the commander and the security officer have access to the armory on the shuttle. Um, there, there are some contingency weapons there in the list of equipment they give you. Like I said, it's very specific. You have these things plus whatever personal equipment. Um, uh, you have just this many things that you can use. Yeah, the map here, the deck plan here does not show the full exterior of the shuttle. The shuttle does have control surfaces, but yeah, it's really designed to get you to the planet and not allow you to go anywhere else. Um, I have actually done some better renders of the interior of the shuttle. Um, let's see. So here is I did one for the standard, which this is done in Dungeon Fog, and you can see the cargo containers here, and then we've got the showers, and then there's the ship's computer, the sensors. You'll notice there's not a lot of space on the interior given to engines and fuel and all that, because, like I said, it's really pretty much a powered glider. Um, the upper floor, you've got a meeting room and a kitchen. There's an airlock, and then the bridge up here with its own toilet. And they put the armory off the bridge in the original one, and then there's some computer labs. And like, I did a rework of this also because it always bugged me that the ladder entry to and from the ship uh, did not go. If I go back to the lower deck, you'll notice there's a ladder entry down here going down out of the ship without any sort of environmental control. So that bugged me. So what I did is I ended up reworking it. So here's my reworked lower level where we have the airlock and then the ladder entry both go through like a decon kind of a chamber here. Did require cutting into the cargo space a little bit, but I was able to work that into my brain by saying that this game was written in 1988, and our concept of miniaturization and technology factors into the space requirements. On my redesign, also, I moved the armory to the back of the ship and off the bridge, so it's a little closer. It's kind of back here with the rest of the gear and not right up there, considering there is a nuke in storage in that armory. uh, you probably wouldn't want it right next to your bridge. What this did allow me to do is put one small sleeping quarters on on the shuttle, which I figured would be for the commander. If anybody's going to have a spot on the comfy shuttle to sleep, it's going to be the commander. The game does have variations of this. There is a combat shuttle that is put into the corporate source book, and there is also a medical shuttle that is in the Cyber MedTech book. So you could run. There are already you're seeing you could run different missions if you're running. You could run a game where you're kind of more of a corporate response team and you're not doing justification missions. Um, but yeah, that gritty survival element to the core of it is really what I appeals to me. Um, it's produced some interesting games. I've always been the GM, like I am for most games, but my players have had to deal with indigenous intelligent species and crazy life forms. There's always also so one of the concessions of the game sitting is that when we went out into space, we found way more habitable worlds than we were supposed to, and scientists couldn't even explain that. And then they started theorizing that maybe there was a precursor species out there that had engineered some of these worlds, which ends up being true. One of the things that'll get you some serious mission cred is if you find alien artifacts, and there are artifacts left around for the various alien species that have been in the cosmos. Let's see. So there's a mission report sheet, which is a nice add-on. This came in one of the later books. Um, so as players, you can even like, kind of like write out your mission reports and then calculate what resources were expended and calculate your mission pay. So that was always cool. Here's an example of a world description. You can see it gives all sorts of information that will let a GM kind of run uh, different adventures on existing worlds, but also gives you ideas on how to formulate themselves. Here's some of the advanced weapons. It's got that very 1980s style. Um, I find it interesting that the standard gear that's provided by the corporation per crewman, and not counting the security specialist or the commander, um, you get one stun pistol and one medium automatic pistol, like bullets, and that's all they give you. And then they give you two magazines of ammunition, I think it is, for each gun. So you really need to actually operate intelligently or spend some money packing your own personal equipment. Um, the stuff that they have that they give you equipment wise though is pretty good. The ship has like a refinery, like a micro refinery. So if you find petrochemicals, you can make fuel for your ship, for your vehicles. Um, what is fun in the game is when you go on a mission and you find that your gear is not ideally set up for the mission you're on. There was one mission where there you go, and um, you could have your granddad's shotgun because again, you could be the child of a previous beta, and so you are owned by the corporation. It's interesting too because the cost of the children born while under corporate ownership gets added to the parents' buyback, not the child's. Um, but the child is still considered property until they're uh, they're paid off. So let's see, what are some other things to talk about? Oh, the corporate warfare or the corporate source book has actually a really good bit on how warfare works in a world with limited interstellar capability. The transmat gates really focus how you can and cannot get to a planet. And so warfare works really differently in that any kind of corporate operation against a world starts years in advance of their operation. They plant sleeper groups and they have like agents working. So when a signal gets sent out, they all operate and start to destabilize things. And then once the destabilization has occurred, then they can march their Ares Marines in. And Ares Marines are that classic 1980s concept of the one man army. They are wearing power armor with strength enhancers and mobility enhancers and big old weapons. And they're designed to be a lot of punch in a little space because, again, your transmat is a 20 by 20 by 70 is the biggest thing you can get through the transmat. And transmats are fixed locations. And so, and they don't even have interstellar communication. That's the other thing is that in the setting, the fastest way to communicate is literally to have somebody walk through a transmat and deliver a message. Um, because they haven't come up with a method of communication that goes fast enough to go interstellar, in a way quicker than the transmat. So you have couriers, um, and so coordinating attacks and warfare, between systems is really tricky, and so you don't have a lot of space battles, because really they don't have the ability to move huge ships around. They do have starfighters and the like, and of course there are still planetary resources. But yeah, it's really a tricky thing for them to actually pull off warfare, and the corporate source book actually does a good job of describing how that happens. Um, so the they even actually, it's funny. I want to share this real quick. They have a chart. I mentioned earlier the hybridization between species. There's this chart. Means nothing to you in abstract, I get it, but each letter code corresponds to a type of animal, and so you cross compare them, and this is the number of mutations you can end up with if you do have mutations. Um, so that's kind of fun. There's the XP chart, 11 levels of XP, um, and then you know it's pretty good. I mean, it really does. It just you get skill points, and then you get some additional hit points basically per level. So that's pretty good. This has been kind of a rambly episode. I get that. Here's some alien creature illustrations and write ups. Very simple stats for non sentient creatures. Usually, you're going to get a con stat, which is also their damage. You're going to get a size, a speed, what class of armor they have, and if they have any natural weapons. And then a description here, which can also give you any sort of explanation of their abilities. There is another picture of an Ares Marine. Let's see. What else? Anything else I want to cover? Mission descriptions, pay per mission reports. Yeah, that covers it for the main points of the game. It is definitely good stuff. Squirrel. There's you can go a lot of places with this. You could play an entire campaign on one world. You could play a series of missions. It's really good for pickup games, um, or little short campaigns here and there. Like maybe you only use the same character for a couple of missions, and then you switch to another character. Um, the death of characters is something that's very real here because again, you are off on an alien world and stuff happens, and sometimes that stuff isn't good. There's my dog trying to kill somebody. So if you hear him, he's just barking because somebody probably looked at the front of our house wrong. But let's see. So I would be happy to field any questions about the game now. I think I covered most of the important things you want to know when it comes to a game setting wise. But if there's anything that I haven't covered or that's got your brains going and you're wondering about, please ask away because I have played this game. I've run this game through for several folks. It's the sort of game I think also that you could probably just lift into. You could lift the setting into another game system and have it be perfectly fine. Because everything's percentile based, it really lends itself well to flexing into other games. Let's see. Yeah, you could do that. There are things that can happen too. Like you can end up going to a world. Um, you can go to a world and find out that another company is actually snuck there and kind of tried to snipe it out from under you. So running into rival justifying teams is a thing similar to like back in D&D. You could run into those other adventuring parties. Um, but yeah, again, there are you have the corporate, you have the justifiers actions. But then there's the Cyber MedTech campaign. There is the Ares campaign. There is the Silent Corporation campaign. You could play free betas if you wanted to. Um, be Where you're making people who grew up on a beta colony and were born free, and you know are doing justification freelance. That's an option as well. Let's see. Do I prefer this or Star Frontiers? Still prefer Star Frontiers. Um, but they're also very different games. Star Frontiers is more polished and therefore a better game. This one does, like I said, requires a little bit of work on your part to make it run smooth. So it's mass and size, but also there is a time limit. That's why they can only get a 70-foot object through them, a 70-foot long object. So the shuttles are 20 by 20 by 70, which is the maximum size of an object you can get through a transmat before they have to shut it down. or before it destabilizes. And if they destabilize, they will usually take the city with them. So it's not a good thing to push the limits of transmat. Um, let's see. Uh, the main source of fun for me running this game, as far as adventures go, comes from the unexpected, the blind beaming to a world with limited resources. And when I keep pushing the limited resources thing, but it is not super limited. I mean, you're not without anything. Um, Let me see. Let me put my glasses on here because I'm going to actually pull this out in the actual physical copy. All right. So what's on a shuttle? Let's look at this. So on a shuttle, you have, where is the shuttle? Okay. Here is the standard stuff that's on a shuttle. The science lab contains a telescope, 20 tracking collars, one atmosphere analyzer, two water testers, one electronic thermometer, one soil and rock analyzer, one organic tissue analyzer, one linguistics cryptography analyzer, one core sampler. The vehicle tool shed contains one carpentry kit, one metalwork kit, one electronics diagnosis kit, um, three laser drills, two chainsaws, one laser lathe, and two cargo loaders. The main cargo bay has a personal shelter for the commander, a personal shelter for each two officers, and two personal shelters for each four enlisted men. One solar generator station, portable. One fuel cell recharger for each shelter, one communicator for each crewman, one sleeping bag for each crewman, one thermos for each crewman. That's one of those words that until when you see it, it's like it never wants to roll off your tongue. We all know what a thermos is. One lantern for each shelter, one flashlight for each two crewmen. I find that interesting. They only give you one flashlight for each two crewmen. One hot cold chest for each shelter, one camp stove for each two shelters, one hot pot for each shelter, two fuel cells for each piece of equipment, one backpack for each crewman, one binoculars for each two crewmen, one mess kit for each two crewmen, one space heater for each shelter, one chronometer for each crewman, two water purification plants, one motion. So as you can see, as I'm going down this, this is really specific. Um, there is a fuel refinery for fossil fuels. You have one light environmental suit for each crewman, one other type of environmental suit for each crewman according to the world conditions, one armored environmental suit for each security officer, a set of carbide plate armor for each security officer, one radiation suit for each engineer. Vehicles on board, you get one ATV, one hovercraft, one helicopter, and any one of the following: a submersible or an ATV truck. Other vehicles come into the game later and are kind of subbed in there. Um, the armory has one stopper, that's a dedicated stun weapon for each crewman, one medium pistol for each crewman, it's 20 clips of standard ammunition for each pistol, one assault rifle for each enlisted man, 10 clips of standard ammunition for submachine gun. Let's see. One laser pistol for each security officer, 10 clips for each laser pistol. It goes down. You get a mortar on there. Laser rifle for each security officer. There's a grenade launcher. There's a machine gun. Um, there is fuel cell recharger. Only the commander or senior officer have access code for the armory. So we had one mission where the commander or the security officer died, and so that was fun. Yeah, it's just like it goes into the sick bay here. It gives you the stats for the shuttle. It's super detailed on what you have. I like the fact that they go into like how many mess kits there are. You know what is on the ship that you have to use, and then also how players can then use that later on. Um, exactly. Resource management in the face of the unknown. It is super fun. And what's neat is each time they've updated the shuttle, they do update that list for the mission specific shuttles. Um, Players get some info on the planet they're crossing over, i.e., do they get an idea of the atmosphere? Yes. So in the setting they use modern science and optics and stuff like that to look at the planets just like we do today and kind of make a best guess, of what the the planet is like. But these planets are well beyond our range to send probes, so they're really using best guesses, which is why you do have environmental suits. Like, you're never going to know the germ count, or if the planet is plague ridden, or if there is, there's acid rain. I mean, you might, if it had like if the atmosphere was such, because we can tell what the atmosphere of a planet is pretty well even today. um they can tell you that, and that's why there is some flexibility in there based on the world you're going to. For example, when you're going to when you're on the, is it the one mission, trying to remember what it is, cold as ice. That mission has a ton of um, cold weather gear. In fact, actually, I think I even have it here. So let me, if I pull up cold as ice, let's see. Here we go. So cold as ice brings in a bunch of new gear, as well as some new animals. Oddly enough, it brings the crocodile into the cold planet base, but that's uh, just wear a warm jacket. Um, but yeah, corporations evidently will make a beta out of everything because the platypus is on the list. So um, the pangolin is on the list as well. Interestingly enough, there are some animals that are so weird that they actually get bumped up in status to being, instead of being betas, they're now considered like the gammas. They're considered exotics because they're just so odd. Oh, that's the other thing I forgot to mention. They have started to make betas out of alien life for alien animals they've found. That's one thing they introduce in the hybrids book, is as we're discovering new animals on other planets, you could they can create uh, betas out of those. So they've spliced in human DNA with some of these alien animals, and they've come up with some interesting results. The results are a little hit and miss because alien life doesn't always like to mesh with us. But yeah, it's all right. Squirrel, have a good one. Yeah, this is a bit more rambly. I even prepared for it, but again, it's one of those ones that's, you know it's a little hard to say too much about. But I was talking about the cold as ice mission. You get in there, a heavy duty hovercraft, camouflage kits. New skills are actually presented as well throughout the game. So um, I should mention that this game had a second life and actually a greater existence in Germany. And there was a German developer who got the rights to it, released like 8 novels for the setting, and then a new version of the role playing game. I've never been able to get a hold of it. Any of them, I don't read German, and so it would be kind of a loss for me. But yeah, it's some of the art in here can be pretty cool. The art, like I said, the art is kind of hit and miss. But look at this rhino enjoying his coffee. You know that's pretty cool. Like, and then the art in here is very comic booky in a lot of cases, but that's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's super sketchy and weird like this, and it just varies highly. um, there's this is the escape artist illustration. It's the back of the cyber medtech book. Yeah, see, there's the med shuttle. You can see they've actually doubled up the med space. And here's actually a good example of the exterior of the shuttles. Um, it's not just a brick; it's got some airplaning on it. It's just the interior map is the space. You figure everything between that and the outside of the ship is all control surfaces and stuff. Now here's the character sheet addendum for cybernetics. You can place your cybernetics wherever. I Oh yeah, and I mentioned earlier so the game also has robots, um, but they're not really considered. I mean, you can make a character robot, but they're not common. They're usually illegal. Um, because they have you can see the little fighty picture down here. Like a lot of science fiction settings, they had their issue with robots, um, and so like AIs aren't allowed to be mobile and stuff. You can make your own corporation if you want. They do talk about that. If you're a bunch of free betas, you can go ahead and do that. Cybernetics are nifty. Um, I mentioned earlier psionics. There are psionics in the game, and so there is the possibility to have. And they the neat thing is they offer two ways to play your psionics in here. You can have the more dynamic psionics where you're doing really cool stuff, or you can have a really basic psionics where it's just a couple of abilities. So the psionic section here is, you can see you've got all these different abilities, right? Cyberpathy, pyrokinesis, da da da. Or here you can just go and do trance, empathy, and psi shield. You know, which are it's kind of your low key. Yeah, you're right. It is one of the few mammals with venom. Um, so it's the game is just, I don't know. I'm gonna run this at some point. Probably run an online game for it. You can see here is an armored submersible. This is in the Poseidon campaign setting, um, where it's a aqua world. They talk about armored sea suits and underwater weapons, some new skills again. Here's some maps for the planets. Um, some of the graphics in here are very limited. I mean, clearly we're talking about the time the game was made in, and then also um, the limits of just publishing in 1988. Um, so, but if you consider this is done by an indie guy and he's got all of these books out and they all present some cool stuff. I'm just flipping through so you can see kind of just how these books, mind you, these are digests. So when you look at it in the PDF, they're all kind of 2 pages to scan. But this is for the tower. This is an exploration of an actual alien artifact site, which is fun. Um, and then the Insidious campaign, which has this horrible monster called Legion. And the interesting about Legion is not an alien creature. He is created by the corporation. Um, and this one is designed. This is the one I said that kind of sort of like, cross between Predator and Alien. Um, he is badass, but it also introduces the Assault career class. Um, which is a pure combat guy. Whereas you have the security specialist is the standard kind of combat guy for Justifiers teams. The assault career is like a full combat guy. You even have minimum attribute scores, for this. So, um, and they get combat suits and the Grim Reaper 15 millimeter assault cannon. This is where we get the assault shuttle, with all of its, and like I said, they do customize the gear. So yeah, that is Justifiers. I mean, really, if anybody's got more questions, that's cool. Uh, it's worth picking up. Drive Through has most of the books, and it's sad that they don't have all of them. They do have all of the important ones, the core books, that though the books that I would consider core, which is the rule book, the corporate source book, the hybrids book, and then the Aborigine source book. I think these are all good. But because every book had something new to offer in terms of careers, equipment, new beta class humanoids, the fact that some of them are missing is kind of sad. I don't know if they just never got around to it, or you know, maybe there are no surviving copies to even get scanned properly. That and that's kind of sad. I I have a dream someday of being able to compile all of the equipment and stuff in one place. That's a big project because there's not really an easy way to rip the text off of these PDFs and transfer it to another format. So that would be a lot of hand entry. Um, but yeah, they are available on drive through, so you can't get them on print on demand. And my copies actually predate drive. My PDFs predate drive through offering them. So I'll go out and say that mine are probably not the same PDFs that drive through offers. Um, I haven't bought any of them off of drive through. Um, I when I got mine, I figured they were lost to time, and when I found the PDFs, I didn't think much about grabbing them. So I may go back and pick them up on drive through again just to see what they're like. But that's about all I can really say um, about Justifiers. No, that's not. There's one last thing. There's plenty of room to add your own stuff. And I do mention this back in my Justifiers video from 5 years ago. Um, the genetic science used in Justifiers is mighty enough to where, and there's enough going on behind the scenes with all the corporate skullduggery and all of that, that you could easily justify, no pun intended, coming up with new types of humanoids. Um, in the my previous video, I mentioned, uh, you know, maybe go ahead and if you really like dinosaurs, there's a possibility that they could Jurassic Park these things and have dinosaur betas. Um, the other possibility is one thing that I really do like the idea of is, so augmented humans are a thing, and the only ones they have in the game are for combat. But in a corporate universe, I can imagine there being other forms of augmented human for other purposes, everything from entertainment to you know construction. Who knows? So you could, to expand on, they've done all this expansion on the betas, but you could very much expand on that concept of augmented humans as well. So let's see. It's possible, and that's the thing. I'm going to look at it and see if they are, but again, there's missing information in there, so it's because they don't have all of the books available. I am still on a quest to get physical copies of all of them. These ones here are not my originals. Like I mentioned, I had to actually go through and buy these again um, on the secondary market. But yeah, so I mean that's Justifiers. I don't I could ramble on about it. You know me. I do like to talk about the things that I like. But give it a try. Check it out. Hope this has put another possible game in your mind. As I come up with other games that I like to play that aren't D&D, I will put them up here and I will talk about them. But other than that, I think we're done for today. Thanks for everybody who came by. Grumpy Squirrel, Mages Musings, all good folks. Mages, I know you have some videos on the brew. You've talked about how you're finally putting the finishing touches on some of those. Cool. Squirrel does some cool shorts and stuff and videos showing his miniatures he's painting. I do want to do some videos on miniatures. I just don't know how to. I don't know how I would do the visuals on that because um, uh, they miniatures are a visual thing. So without being able to show the miniatures well on screen, it seems kind of pointless to do a video. In my mind. Echo, thanks for coming by as well. Was a smaller turnout today, but then again, it's kind of an obscure game, and so I don't know if the Monday has anything to do with it. The Mondays have normally been good turnouts, but Have a good one, everybody. Get out and game. And this has been Eli from Elfbait.